So, as I said, I'm Carol Hoffman, and I'm the Associate Provost and Director of Work Life. I'd like to welcome you all here today, this evening, for this very important session about forming a family, legal and financial planning for LGBT New Yorkers. And as you know, because you signed up for the workshop, it's going to address questions about forming a family with special focus on adoptions, second parent adoptions, known donor agreements, and protecting your partner and spouse through proper planning of wills, proxies, taxes, etc. So I'd like to say a little bit about the Office of Work Life. I hope that you're all familiar with it. There are brochures over there, as well as other materials describing our services. But we have a number of services, including the School and Child Care Search Service to help you identify and find child care and schooling, both public and private, independent. We have the Housing Information Referral Service, so if you're interested in purchasing or renting at a different place than where you're currently living, we have somebody who can help you with that as well. We offer many other workshops on those topics. We have the backup care program, we have a wellness program, we have the breastfeeding support program, so if any of you do become moms, look to the moms, or if you're not already, we do have lactation rooms available. So, so we have a variety of services, and if we don't have services that meet your needs, and you have any suggestions of things that you'd like to see our program do, please let us know, and we'd really appreciate that kind of input. So somebody wrote to us saying that this is the first LGBT event that they've seen sponsored for faculty and staff, primarily since there are things for students here at Columbia, and they were very appreciative. So we're happy to do more events or more workshops if that makes sense to address any kind of special concerns or issues. So I'd like to go ahead now and introduce our two speakers who have just been incredibly generous and wonderful with the planning of this event and with their time and being here. This is Avita Nancy Torrey, and is an adoption attorney at Greenberg Adoption and the law offices of Clifford Greenberg, and co-hosts the monthly family law clinic at the LGBT Center. And she writes a legal column for It's Conceivable Now, LGBT Parenting in New York. Wendy Fitzsimmons, to her left, is an estate and tax lawyer and a partner at Romer Debus, did I say that right? DeBas, yeah. LLP, which is a proud member of the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce of New York. So they're going to go ahead and give a presentation. There'll be time for a lot of questions and answers. As I said, if afterwards there's any concerns that you have in terms of the recording, please let me know.
Thank you so much and welcome. As is mentioned, I'm an adoption attorney here in New York, and prior to being a lawyer, I was a magazine journalist, and that's how I found my passion in law. I was reporting on the American family and what that means, and obviously the traditional American family has changed, and the non-traditional American family is who I help. It's a large part of my practice, the LGBT portion, and it's something that I'm so proud to be able to do as a native New Yorker, but also as someone whose closest friends and family members are proud and gay and deserve the legal rights that everyone else is able to provide for their families. And something that has meant the world to me in my practice is being able to help those families and friends adopt and have children who they don't have to worry about any more than any other parent would. One question that a lot of people ask is, can I adopt? I'm gay, can I adopt? What does this mean for my family planning? And absolutely, we're lucky to live in a state in New York where equal rights are the law of the land here. And unfortunately, that is not so much the case in other parts of the country. And obviously, with the political climate right now, we saw in the recent election that lots of states are taking the initiative and enforcing the fact that people should be able to marry the person they love. But a lot of the country still has a while to go before they catch up. And that is the biggest issue for many of my families. They live in New York, and like many New Yorkers, you think, I'm here, I'm never leaving. Why do I need to worry about what other states do when I'm protected here and my kids are protected here? And then I have to remind them that really fantastic music camp you plan on sending your child to in 10 years is not in New York. How are you planning on getting there? And they say, oh, we're just going to fly. And if that flight has an emergency landing somewhere and the parent, who's not the biological parent, is the one traveling with the child, what if they don't recognize you as a legal parent? What will you do then? And then they think, oh boy, we won't send them to that camp. We'll go somewhere else. What about that fantastic vacation? The place that your family has always traveled to, you're not going to bring your child there. And they think, oh, well, we'll always travel in pairs. The biological parent will always be there. We'll be able to fight it. It won't be an issue. We'll have the birth certificate. And because New York usually puts both parents on the birth certificate anyway, that'll be good enough, right? And then I remind them that, unfortunately, because of DOMA and the way that it works in other states, they're not required to recognize an adoption that hasn't taken place, that an adoption that's only in your heart because you were both there for the biological planning of this child, or you were both there for the adopting of this child. If both parents haven't participated in a second parent adoption in New York, the states are only required to recognize the parent who either participated in the adoption, if it's an adopted child, or the parent who's the biological connection to the child. And that's something that makes my clients stop and realize this is why this is important, because you don't want to be restricted to where you can travel, and you don't want to have to carry all these sets of paperwork and the emergency number of your lawyer in case someone pushes you back. If there's a medical emergency, even as minor as your child, breaking his or her wrist, and you can't make that decision, and medical treatment is being delayed because they need to get in touch with the person they consider to be the parent, that's a terrible position for families to be in. And luckily in New York, second parent adoption exists solely for that purpose, to be able to have a legal process that's clear, concise, and easy to follow if you're an attorney who handles it, and make sure that people are forced to recognize a family. Even if in their state it doesn't count, it counts in New York, and therefore because it counts in New York, they have to honor it. A lot of people ask me then, okay, so that's great. We know that for a second parent adoption, that's something we can do in New York, but what if we're just interested in forming a family and we're not really sure how we want to go about doing that yet, and we're trying to figure out what our best options are? Adoptions are all very similar in many ways. Everything requires a background check because people want to make sure that child abuse issues are covered, criminal history. My colleague Cliff Greenberg always says, Gandhi was arrested. People get arrested. It's not a big deal. And he's right. People get arrested. It's not going to prevent you from adopting unless it's something like a crime involving children. So many people adopt, many people make mistakes. It's not something that will prevent you from being able to move forward with your family. Another thing that's common in most adoptions is a home study. You'll have a licensed social worker come into your home, meet with you and your family and the child, and it's really, it sounds so scary to welcome this stranger into your home and then talk about your relationship history and your work life and how, your parenting styles and how you punish your child because that's how your parents punished you, and whether or not you agree with the philosophy. No one's there to judge you. Really, the social worker is there to be the eyes and ears of the court because the judge isn't coming to your home. And you don't want the judge coming to your home. You'd rather have the social worker who writes a report and then says to the court that everything that you're representing yourself to be, in the social worker's opinion, is exactly what you are. And there's no right or wrong answer. So people always say in New York, we live in a one-bedroom. Like, how is this going to appear to the court? There isn't a size or a location requirement. It's things that, if you logically think that it's acceptable, it's probably acceptable. And in New York, everyone lives in a one-bedroom. Everyone lives in a studio. Everyone converts their dining room into a bedroom with a shoji screen. That's life. And the courts know that because they live here too. So we're lucky in the sense that in New York City, the courts are so happy to facilitate adoptions for LGBT families. I've never experienced any discrimination against an LGBT family, and the requirements for adoptions by LGBT families are no different than by any other family. And so that's a big concern too. Will I face discrimination? Is it harder for me? And it's not. The legal process isn't at all. What most of my families really want to figure out is how do they either find the children they want to adopt, or how do they have the children they want? There are many different options to do so, and I'm going to touch upon the ones that are most popular and kind of glaze a little bit more about the ones that most people have considered, but sometimes it isn't the right decision for them. And if you have more questions, please feel free to ask at the question and answer panel, and I can go into more detail. in New York City, foster care is a very popular option for a lot of LGBT families. There are 14,000 children in New York City foster care, and many of those children are waiting to be adopted. And a child who is removed from their home is when ACS investigates a claim and finds that it's no longer safe for the child to remain there. And what happens if ACS feels that there is no hope for reunification with the birth family, the child becomes freed for adoption. And that's something that our firm does a lot of. We've done thousands of them in foster care families, and it's a really lovely way to be able to help kids who are already in the system, and they're looking for families and they need them. So that's something that a lot of our families consider, and there are actually programs that are specifically for LGBT prospective adoptive parents who are looking, especially sometimes if you're open to adopting older children, are looking to adopt children who were removed from their homes solely because of the fact that they were gay and because their biological families did not accept them, and therefore they're in the system for that reason alone. And we've had families who seek those children out because they relate, or because they don't want them to have to go through that, and because they want to open their homes to children who were kicked out of theirs. So that's one type of adoption and family formation. Another popular segment of the adoption community is private adoption, and that's what a lot of people hear. They have three parts of private adoption. It's the agency, and that's going to a certified agency, oftentimes in New York State, and working with the agency's team of social workers and helping create a profile for your family and yourself, and the agency finds the birth mother. So the agency, like if you Google private adoption agency New York, you'll see the sponsored Google ads, and those agencies have large marketing budgets so that if I was a pregnant woman and was looking for an adoptive family, those would be the first things that hit. And they're 1-800 numbers, they're open all the time, there's always someone picking up the call. And so those agencies are accessible to people who are in need of finding a kind person to talk to who can help them with their planning. And the benefit of the agency is that there is someone who's acting as the intermediary. There's always a social worker involved who can advise you, and there's always something, they've always seen it. They have the experience, they know what to expect. Anything that you're asking them isn't the first time they've heard it. And that's the really great thing about agencies. I work with a number of agencies that are very LGBT friendly, and it's interesting, most of them, their standard wait time for a child is 9 months. And so how funny is that? People always think that's so funny. And then when it happens faster, and we have some clients where it's been 2 months, and they sit there and we were told it was 9 months. And then everyone says, yes, but this is a good thing. And they're like, we haven't bought a crib. So, we have people who are scouring Babies R Us because they're bringing home their children. And it's a great feeling, but when you think you have 9 months and all of a sudden it's 2 months, it can be very hectic. But the benefit of that is to have a social work team who solely exists to be able to help you with the transition. Another option in regards to private adoption is private placement. And that's when you work specifically with an attorney who helps you find a birth mother. And if you're on Twitter, for example, or Facebook, you might see friends or family members who have, hashtag name adopt. And oftentimes it's people who, at the guidance of their attorney, have created their own social media world solely for the purpose of kind of getting the buzz out there. Previously, people would place those ads in newspapers and penny savers. Sometimes people would, hand out postcards at their church or to their babysitters to hand around school, just saying, if anyone knows of a young woman who is pregnant and is looking to place her child for adoption, please contact us. And this is who we are. And it's almost like a little dating ad. It's like a tiny little profile with a picture, and you look pretty, and the things you're saying are interesting, but funny at the same time. It's very well crafted because you want to speak to the broadest audience possible. And the private placement community is really great for LGBT families when they are concerned that they'll face discrimination within an agency, when they feel like they really want a very personalized approach and they want someone to work one-on-one with them and not say what they typically do, but what they want to do just for you, as opposed to the agency saying, this is our tried and true formula, it'll work. They want something that's more tweaked to their personal preferences. The third option in regards to private adoptions is really international adoptions. And that's something that is becoming more and more difficult because, and I'm sure you've read in the news, international regulations for adoptions are very stringent. And whether or not they allow gay families to adopt is on a per country basis. So there are a number of really great attorneys in the New York City area that handle international adoptions. I'm not one of them. It's such a specialty for those people that if you're interested in it, I'm happy to suggest them to you, and they're really fantastic. But it is a difficult area of the law to maneuver. And one of the things that I'd like to stress is oftentimes clients will come to me and say, you know, we worked with this person because she lives in our area and she's a family lawyer, so we thought, you know, she doesn't charge very much, and she said she'd do it, you know, at a very reasonable rate. She didn't know what she was doing. And our process has been delayed and delayed and delayed. And it's really important to us to get legal status and to finish this process. And we just kind of feel like we've been given the runaround. And one of the difficulties is a lot of people hear the word adoption, think it's really fun, but think it's really easy. And it's not. It's a very nuanced area of the law, and it's very important to find an attorney who specializes and focuses on adoptions, solely for the fact that just because someone knows or has done an adoption once does not mean they know how to do your adoption. And it is something that is important, especially for why people say, well, couldn't you just learn how to do an international adoption? And I always say I would never try to learn something without having mentors on board who would be willing to help me. But in something like forming a family, why don't you not go to the experts directly? Go to the people who already know how to help you, who do this every day and could do it in their sleep. Those are the best people to really help. And once you have those children, once you have brought those children home, is kind of when the second parent adoption process begins. If one parent has adopted and the other parent has not, then you do the second parent adoption. But the second parent adoption is also very critical when you've done family formation. And that's another big growing area of my practice. Family formation is exactly what it sounds. It's using some sort of biological genesis, is what my colleague says, to create a child. And so that can be done in one of two ways, typically. You can use a known donor, or you can use an anonymous donor. So the known donor would be finding someone you know, or finding someone you know who knows someone, and making the connection and talking to them and seeing whether or not you're interested in having that person play a role in your life, or that person doesn't want a role in your life and really just wants to be able to provide the biological makeup for you to be able to have a child together. There are issues in regards to that in New York. It's very important that that person is fully advised of his rights and responsibilities, because up until birth, that person is responsible for that child. And until that person actually surrenders his rights on a piece of paper, for example, if you had child support, you could collect against that person. And that's a very big concern for many of our clients when they bring in the known donors and they say, well, I don't want to pay child support. This is not the arrangement we're looking for. Those are things that really have to be addressed, because you want to make sure that even though you might not want to pay child support, and even though you might not be seeking child support, if it becomes an issue and a state or a government agency is involved, the law clearly states that person is the legal parent until otherwise notified. So that's something for known donors that it's a question of what do you want? Do you want anonymity, and therefore you go into a bank and you look through lots of profiles and you see lots of pictures and you set your standards and then you decide it? Or do you want someone that you can actually talk to and interview? And there are the pros and cons of that as to whether or not, if you deal with someone who you know, they know you, and therefore they know you're going to be pregnant, and they know you are pregnant, they know when the child is born, and what if they change their mind, and what if they decide they want more involvement or less? This is when having legal advice really comes in handy. And I've actually had a lot of clients who have gone through that arrangement, and then first trimester in, when the hormones kind of level out, they realize, we didn't have these discussions. We should put this in paper. Like, we should discuss this now before we're presenting this person with a piece of paper to surrender their child for adoption so that my partner can adopt. And so we're doing a lot of kind of recon right now with families, and it's perfectly okay. It's just they realize that the conversation orally isn't often enough, because sometimes people really need to read the numbers on a piece of paper and sign it to realize what they're agreeing or disagreeing to. I almost consider it like mediation. If it's almost like a custody agreement, you think of everything you could possibly think of and see if you agree. And if you don't, then you have to figure out a way to agree. And that's the known donor route. And the private bank route, there are lots of really great banks that a lot of our clients use, and they've all been very happy with them. It's a matter of whether or not you want to coordinate, for example, mailing of a sperm deposit to you, or do you want to be able to just go pick it up because it's a local bank? How many profiles do you want to look at? Do you want to look at something that's very small and exclusive, or something that has the most number of donors possible because you're looking for a specific characteristic that won't be available in a small pool? So that's the known donor versus sperm bank situation. And I think it's one of those things that the community exists for it. So if you go on websites like It's Conceivable Now, people are posting their opinions. And so people will say what worked for them, what didn't, what was a waste of money, and what was really worth spending for. The flip side of that is, of course, surrogacy, which is right now considered to be prohibited in New York for fee because of the way that the statute is written. Currently, there are bills pending in the state that rewrite those laws so that they don't penalize gay families who want to have biological children. The way that our clients have been able to work around that is by going to surrogacy lawyers or surrogacy centers in other states where it is allowed. And so basically, it's an expensive endeavor because you're already filtering in the fees for the actual surrogate, the fees for the egg donor, and then fees for travel. So, but I've had clients who've done it in California. I've had clients who've done it in Colorado, where they have employed out-of-state resources, and then when they come back, because only one person is on the birth certificate typically, they'll do the second parent adoption with me when they come back. So it's a process, and it's great when it works out. It really is, because when you want a biological connection to your children, it's really wonderful when that can happen. But it is a difficult process, and we're hoping that the change in the laws will make it easier for people to do it locally, and for people to not have to travel back and forth to another state in order to just be able to have a biological connection to their children. One additional thing that I think is interesting is a very non-traditional way of having a family, something called co-parenting. The best analogy that I can give is if a couple splits up and then that couple remarries and you've got basically two sets of parents, that's kind of what co-parenting is. It's something that the law doesn't speak about. In the law, you're allowed to have two legal parents. You're not supposed to have really more than that. And exceptions are very difficult to find because of it. But we've found, especially with my work with the LGBT Center, that there are co-parenting groups. So you'll have a man and a woman who, whether or not they have partners, are interested in having a biological child together and raising that child together. But the complications that arise with that are, of course, what are the details? What are the specifics? I want to go to Aruba on vacation and this person wants to go to Europe. Like, how do we split custody necessarily of a child? So it's almost as if you're preparing for a divorce for a marriage that never took place. You're laying out all those details and outlining all the what ifs, but you're never marrying that person. I think the best way to say it is there are lots of different ways to go about having a family in New York. And luckily, the law, in the most part, is in your favor. It's just a matter of finding an attorney you feel comfortable with, and I think that's one of the most important things. There are lots of really great adoption attorneys in New York, and it's a very small community, so when we all know each other, and we would never pit one against the other, it's a matter of who you like. It's a matter of who you're comfortable with. If you're the kind of person who wants to talk over the phone and you feel as though the attorney you're meeting with is not very receptive over the phone, or if you're the kind of person who emails at 10 o'clock at night and is very comforted when someone emails you back, like me, 5 minutes later from their phone, that's what you kind of look for. You look for someone that you feel like you can trust, and it's a very personal process. And then I'm proud to say that many of the clients that I've worked with, we've become friends because I love receiving holiday cards, and I get very emotional at the finalizations because it's a really lovely moment, and it's something that I'm very happy to be a part of.
So, good evening. I'm Wendy Fitzsimmons. I'm a trust and estates attorney, practicing and based out of New York. My practice focuses in a few different areas because I'm also a tax attorney. So I'll be speaking to you tonight about the upcoming changes to the estate tax legislation, to gift tax, everything, and capital gains tax too. I'm happy to talk about briefly just because it's on everybody's mind. Major decisions are going to be made tomorrow. And it's something that I've thought about and been a part of at length recently, and I've also published a book, so I'm happy to give you a copy of the book on the subject after the lecture tonight if you're interested. A large portion of my client base is from the gay and lesbian community. And it's really interesting to see the change in the practice since the Marriage Equality Act. Before the Marriage Equality Act, we did things one way. Well, now there's sort of an open canvas, and you can do things in a more simple and I think what's more cost-effective to the client manner. Now, what's interesting is we don't really know how all of these changes and these different modes of drafting wills for a gay couple as opposed to a revocable trust, we don't know about the nuances yet because a lot has yet to play out in the court systems. Marriage has just become a possibility, and it's a little bit morbid to say, but people need to start dying to see how this will play out, to play out in the trust and estates area. I mean, that's what trust and estates is. For straight couples, what I tell them when they have children is that you absolutely have to start planning. You need a will for no other purpose, even if you're renting and you have no property, if you have children. Obviously, that goes for gay families, but what's even more important is the healthcare directive, okay, and the guardianship issues that surround the will. Things are different, and even though New York is fantastic and that we've passed the Marriage Equality Act, other states do not recognize gay marriage outside of New York. So as far as a healthcare directive, I typically describe what a healthcare proxy to a client by using the example of the movie The Descendants. So if you've seen the movie The Descendants, George Clooney has to make a decision as to how to care for his wife because she can't speak for herself. Now, he has the privilege of being able to walk into that hospital room in any state and speak for her, with or without a formal healthcare directive. If you're in a gay family, you do not have that privilege. So you absolutely have to take care of your healthcare directives in advance. And I recommend that if you travel out of state, when you carry, or just like if you traveled outside the country, you'd carry your passport in a specific book with you. Carry your marriage certificate with you and carry your healthcare proxies with you. God forbid something happens. The law says in certain states that the person who can make a decision if you can't speak for yourself is your next of kin, is your mother, is your father, is your sister, is your brother, is not your spouse. So if you have your healthcare proxy with you and you're prepared, that decision can be made right there. And then also a very important thing to include in the document is that you're entitled to visitation as the spouse. If you have that in writing, that will be recognized in another state. So the second document that goes along with a healthcare proxy is a living will. And I describe the living will with the example of The Descendants, but also with, if anybody remembers, back when I was in law school, the case was defined as the Terry Schiavo case, where the husband wanted to pull the plug on his wife and the parents disagreed, and they fought over what to do. And of the documents that are, I mean, all of these documents are end-of-life documents, so they're documents people don't like thinking about. This is the one that they most don't like thinking about because it really speaks to if you're a vegetable, if, you know, not just you can't speak for yourself, but you're a vegetable and you are about to die, and 2 doctors have said that you're about to die, and it gives you the ability to say, I want life to continue. I want you to do everything in your power to keep me alive. Or it gives you the option to say, pull the plug. I don't want to exist in that state, and I want my family members to know that it's absolutely okay with me to pull the plug in this situation. Now imagine the case if you're married, you live in New York, marriage is recognized in New York, you move to a state where it's not recognized, and you don't have these documents, and that decision needs to be made, and your spouse, amidst grief and everything else, isn't given the right to make that decision for you by law. Well, if you're prepared and you have this document, your spouse can speak for you on exactly that issue, which I think is incredibly important. Other documents that you should be concerned about are powers of attorney. Powers of attorney give your spouse the right to handle financial matters, to handle tax matters, to handle mortgages, to handle real estate, to handle just about anything you can think of under the sun. And if you're prepared and you give your spouse, again, it's about when you leave New York State, or if you think about moving and you're vulnerable in a particular state for a period of time, if you have these documents drafted in advance, you're prepared. Okay, so then we go to the will, which is a very simple document. And in New York, we have the advantage of our probate system is not the end of the world. A lot of people who live in California or who live in Massachusetts, the immediate step that they go to is they draft a trust. Nobody trusts the probate courts. Well, in New York, you can trust the probate courts, and you can specifically trust the probate courts in New York because they recognize gay marriage. So before, what I had to do a couple of years ago for a gay couple is, as a default, the very first document we would go to would be called a revocable trust. And a revocable trust isn't particularly expensive in the realm of drafting trusts. So it's a nice vehicle that allows you to avoid probate court. And it's particularly, and it was the mandate before the Marriage Equality Act. But now you can absolutely do a will. But you should use caution in doing a will. And here's why you should use caution. Because next of kin can contest the will for anyone. But if you have family members that you think would object to property being distributed to your spouse, then you absolutely should just stay out of probate court altogether. Avoid the issue. If you do a revocable trust, it's a relatively inexpensive trust and allows you to dictate who you would like the property to go to outside the probate system. Now, another very important issue that's dealt with in a will and probably paramount to any family is the guardianship selection. So again, for two spouses who are gay or for two spouses who are not, if you have a child, you absolutely should be designating who the guardian is in advance. And a will is a very easy, simple way to do that. So I highly recommend that everyone take care of their will as soon as possible, even though it's a subject matter that people, they really don't like thinking about. A lot of clients come to me with different tax questions, okay? So just to review the very basics of the estate tax and how that impacts families and gift tax and the nuances with the gay community. We have an estate tax in New York. The estate tax in New York is 16% over the value of $1 million. And $1 million is a lot of money. But if you have a life insurance policy that's worth over $500,000 and you own a home in Manhattan or anywhere else in New York, you are very close to that exemption amount. Now, what's fantastic about the Marriage Equality Act is it changed the marital deduction for this estate tax exemption and put gay families on equal footing with straight families. As far as the marital deduction, it is recognized in New York. So one spouse can die before the other and not worry that the estate will be taxed on their death at the state level for that 16%. Unfortunately, at the federal level, we're not seeing any changes, and we're really seeing a lot of obstinance from the IRS in recognizing gay families. And so what does this mean at the federal level? Straight families right now, the husband and wife get a $10 million estate tax exemption from a very hefty tax. The tax is 35%. That tax, there are lots of different opinions on what's going to happen to that tax. Obama's plan is to put the exemptions at $7 million for a married couple, so that's $3.5 million for each couple, and raise the tax rate to 45%. Okay, but we don't know, and we'll know more actually tomorrow, about his negotiations with Congress and whether or not he's able to pass his agenda through, okay? And if he doesn't, and we still have a stopgap between the president and Congress, what we're going to see with the estate tax is we're going to see a $1 million exemption for individuals, not for married couples. You have a $1 million exemption. You'll have the straight couples will have the marital deduction at the federal level, but the estate tax will rise to 55%. So that's a significant portion of someone's estate, over $1 million. And again, it's kind of easy to get there if you have life insurance. If you own a home, we're talking 20, 30 years down the road, 55% of what you've built over your lifetime is going to be subject to tax. Now, this becomes even more crucial for a gay family because at the federal level, you don't get a marital deduction. So when the first spouse dies, the second spouse gets that property, and if there's no planning that had gone on, 55% of the estate that was in the first spouse's name, it gets taxed. So that's huge. And so it really forces advanced planning during the spouse's lifetime. Okay, now what also is interesting is the gift tax, and there's been a lot of flurry and there's been a lot of excitement, if you will, like excitement around tax. It almost sounds like an oxymoron, but there has been, like, people are sort of up in arms, like, about this gift tax and what's going to happen and how do I take advantage of it. And how it really applies to gay families is that a straight husband and wife at the federal level can give to each other during their lifetime. You have your parents die and they leave you their house and it passes to you. Well, if you put your spouse on the deed to that property, you've gifted your spouse that property and they're subject to the gift tax. Currently, gift tax is 35%. Okay, so, and again, with the changes in the legislation, that can be going up to 45%, 55%. So that's not just a death tax, that's a lifetime tax that a gay family really needs to worry about, and I think it's crucial. So what we see a lot of people doing, especially right now, because another thing that happens with taxes, they tend to bring out the last minute in people, and we're seeing the last minute right now. As of December 31st, 2012, these huge exemptions for individuals, they're going away for the most part. Like that we know, and we certainly know that that's true for gift tax. So I advise lots of different alternatives. So if you have a family member, if you have a parent, or if you are fortunate enough to have a significant amount of assets in the $5 million mark, and your parent, can gift this property in a very simple way by transferring the deed, they should do it right now. They should transfer that deed to that piece of property, give it to the children. They can use their lifetime gift tax exemption, which right now is at $5 million, and that's for everyone. So if they do that by December 31st of 2012, they really save themselves a lot in gift tax. And again, that's why everybody it's created this flurry of people going to their tax and their trust and estates attorneys and saying, what can I do? How can I take advantage of this gift tax exemption? Because it's a really use it or lose it exemption right now. So just on that same subject, if anybody is interested, as far as the estate, we've gone over the estate tax, we've gone over the marital deduction, we've gone over the gift tax issues. Just I'll briefly touch, even though it's a little bit outside the scope of the presentation, but because it's such a topical issue, the capital gains tax and what we're looking at, and how that would affect if you have a home and you want to sell your home, and what that means. Long-term capital gains. Obama has said that he will extend the Bush tax cuts. What are the Bush tax cuts? They give you, among other things, all of these estate tax exemptions and gift tax exemptions. But one of the most important things that they give you are capital gains taxes at 15%. Obama said, I'm going to keep them really low for everyone. We're going to raise revenue to deal with our deficit in another way. The people that I'm going to hit the hardest are the people that are over the $1 million mark. It's called the Warren Buffett rule, okay? And so the people in the 33 to 36% tax bracket, their capital gains tax is going to switch to 20%. And then also, people in that tax bracket are going to get, because of Obamacare, there's a 3.8% that's going to be added to capital gains tax for that very high tax bracket. So capital gains are changing for the very wealthy, and they're going to be upwards of 23.8%, okay, which is a significant leap, especially when you look at the fact that corporate tax rates, Obama's dropping them to 29% from 35%. So that spread between an individual and a corporation is getting, especially for a wealthy individual and a corporation, is getting small. So that's the topical tax issue, just to sort of leave you with, given everything that's going on in the media and what will happen tomorrow. So, and on the subject of taxes, personal income tax, okay? Now that spouses can marry in the state of New York, what does that mean for your personal income taxes? Well, you can file jointly at the state level, okay, and take the marital deduction, which is great. But what does that really mean? That means that you actually have to file 4 returns, because the feds don't recognize marriage. So what is the practical ramification of that? Get a good accountant who knows about these issues. I am a tax attorney. I can walk you through the tax code and structure documents for you and talk to you about the bigger pictures in tax planning. But what you absolutely need is a more than competent CPA right now to handle what this is, because there are so many nuances to it. It's an option to file your state tax return, your federal tax return, and for unmarried individuals, which is what's going on at the federal level, you can take a head of household. Okay, you can claim head of household, okay, and get the exemption there. So and the head of household is someone who has a dependent. So the dependent would be the child. So one of the couples or one spouse files that, claims as head of household, and the other does not. But really, in order to do that, you need to speak to a CPA about why that would make sense. That is not in the purview of my expertise. But I wanted to deal with the issue because it's such a topical issue right now, given the Marriage Equality Act. But the bottom line is, gay couples in New York need to file four sets of returns. You need to file married at the state level, you need to file separately at the federal level, and then you need to file married at the federal level as well. And a good CPA is going to be able to walk you through this and make sure that you're doing everything right. Some people, there has been some discussion in the press about people filing as married at the federal level. And you can file a specific return that allows you to do that and say that you're stating a claim. And you're sort of hedging that DOMA will be found unconstitutional. And by the time it comes around and the IRS looks at your return, that it won't be an issue. And there are different taxes that the people are doing the same kind of thing with. As a tax practitioner, I don't recommend that given the IRS penalties. I just don't think it's a smart leverage. The penalties are extremely high and they accumulate from April 15th. So just if you're going to do that, also file a federal return where you're filing as individuals separately. That would be my advice. And again, a CPA is really going to be your best bet in this type of situation. Okay, so to piggyback off of what she was saying with adoption, as a tax attorney, I can speak a little bit about the adoption tax credit. Right now, for 2013, this is part of the Bush tax cuts as well. Everybody is thinking that it won't be extended. Okay, so you will only get the adoption tax credit if you have a special needs child, and you'll get it in the amount of $5,000 or $6,000. Okay, so what does this mean practically? In 2012, it was $12,650. In 2011, it was $13,360, and it was refundable in the years 2011 and 2010. So that's a huge drop. Okay, and how does this play out? What is a special needs child? The requirements for a special needs child are the child is a United States citizen or resident. The second requirement is that the state determines that the child cannot or should not be returned to his or her parents' home. And 3, a state determines that the child probably will not be adopted, but for the assistance that you've provided. So only in this very limited circumstance do you get the adoption tax credit. Okay, so this is a huge change, and again, has created a sort of another tax flurry with these Bush tax cuts and what's going to happen with Obama in Congress, and will he be able to pass things through? And we were discussing before this presentation that this is less partisan of a tax than, say, capital gains tax or estate tax. It really doesn't, this is more of a family issue, and you're encouraging people to build families. And I included an article in the folder that I gave you on how the adoption tax credit changes for a gay family. What's interesting is, in a straight family, the step-parent cannot get the tax credit if they adopt their spouse's biological child because they're married. and that marriage is recognized in federal law. Okay, well, gay couples have been taking advantage of that because they're discriminated against, so they may as well get one thing as far as the IRS is concerned. And this one thing they've been trying to get and they've been filing for is the adoption tax credit, because guess what? The feds don't see this couple as married. So in that circumstance where the spouse adopts the other's biological child, they get this, and what was until in 2012 almost $13,000 credit. And also you get exclusions from income. If your employer is helping with the adoption expenses, that's excluded from your annual income. So this is worth real money to people, certainly equivalent to the home buyer's credit that was so popular in 2009. So gay couples have been taking advantage of this and saying, I'm going to file this credit, whereas a straight family could not. Well, guess what the IRS has done? And the IRS has been auditing everybody, and they have been saying that this is not acceptable. So it's another situation where people are sort of hedging their bets on when is DOMA going to be found unconstitutional. And it's the opposite end of really the same spectrum. And again, my advice, the very first step would be speak to a CPA, but the second is I don't think it's a smart bet. The penalties are too severe, and I just don't think it's worth paying those penalties.
So I just wanted to chime in super quickly on the tax credit. Right now we're waiting for it to go in front of the different voting bodies, and we're really hopeful it'll be extended. As Wendy was saying, it's got support from both sides, and people are really positive about adoption. Family issues, when they're talking about growing families, having children, being able to afford to have those children and support those children, are typically things that no one wants to say they're against. It's just a matter right now whether or not they get a lot of support and enough support. On Facebook and on the internet, there's a site called Save the Adoption Tax Credit. I urge you to go on, click like, sign a pledge. It helps. It helps all types of families. And as Wendy was saying, yes, the IRS is very stringently applying the tax credit for all types of families. We have seen all types of families where they are being audited because the IRS wants to make sure also that what the tax credit is being used for is what it's intended for. The loophole for LGBT families, we've seen it done successfully. We've seen it done unsuccessfully. Right now, most of it is kind of in the waiting, because I think people are trying to figure out how stringently they're supposed to apply it. And you think, you hear the IRS and then you forget that the IRS is made up of individuals who apply their standards on an individual level. So sometimes the treatment isn't consistent across the board. And I think that finding a really fantastic accountant, specifically one who is LGBT friendly, is something that either of us would be happy to help you. There are lots of them in New York City. They're really great, but they know about this. And I think that's one of those things where if you also want to go to your local accountant, sure, but they're not going to know how many returns you're supposed to file. They're not going to know what the pros and the cons and the benefits are. And if you do this, are you flagging yourself for an audit? They're going to at least be able to advise you as to, should we take this risk, or are there other things that you could come up with in audit that we don't want to call attention to? Let's just file it as we would normally. The help of a seasoned professional in situations like this, I think especially with the IRS and with the court system, is crucial. And I think that's kind of the biggest decision that you make, is to find those professionals you want to work with, but to make sure that they're competent and they're very experienced in this area of law. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. How does the second parent adoption play out if you use IVF? Right now, because of the way that the surrogacy laws are written, surrogacy is prohibited for fee. But if you use IVF and it's your partner, the way that it currently works is it's like another loophole in the law, because it's not for fee. You wouldn't be exchanging payment for it. So there are parameters within that type that I have colleagues of mine who are licensed in both New Jersey and New York, and therefore they're very well versed in the surrogacy aspect of it. They'd be able to help you clear kind of the surrogacy requirements that would be part of that, but it wouldn't be prohibited. so to speak. And they would actually be able to touch better upon whether or not the second parent adoption would be required. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to put you in touch with them. Actually, a lot of people have been asking about that because I know at fertility clinics also, it's something people are really interested in exploring, but it's something that's definitely more on the surrogacy side, so I'd be happy to refer them to you. So the question was whether or not it's more expensive to work with a private agency as versus a private attorney, and that's a really great question. There are a number of agencies that actually offer a sliding scale. One thing I know that a lot of my clients like is to be able to plan for their finances ahead of time. So to be able to go into a meeting and say, approximately what do your family spend? I know clients who have spent within the $30,000 range within an agency, but that's soup to nuts. That's everything but the legal fee for the finalization. For private adoptions, it's more specific because it is so personalized as to what you're looking for. Are you looking for a marketing blitz? Or are you looking just kind of for the basic package? I think that the fees in regards to agency as versus private adoption attorney are very comparable. I think also that in New York City, so many of the private adoption attorneys often do agency finalizations that everyone knows each other. And so you're never going to find, and I always caution my clients against this, if you ever find someone who's really so well priced, it's probably because they don't know what they're doing, or they're trying to build a practice, or because they're just so desperate for the money. Everyone in New York City, and this is why it's really an issue of comfort, everyone kind of charges the same because we all know each other. And because oftentimes many of the people I refer cases to have acted as mentors to me, and I interned for them. And because it's an issue of respect also, that you'll never find someone who is so drastically more or less expensive than someone else. So agencies and private adoption attorneys are very comparable. It's definitely, I always tell my clients to interview both and see what you like. Do you like one person better than the other? Did you like the fact that there are going to be other families going through the process at the same time that you can reach out to, or did you dislike that? And I think that's how clients, I can never tell which way that they're going to go, but they're always happy with their decision, and that's why it's kind of good to just interview more than one.
Question was second parent adoption. Does Columbia reimburse employees going through this process? Some other companies do, and because gay families have been taking advantage of the loophole that the federal government doesn't recognize them as married and claiming the adoption credit for the second parent. So how does, so it's topical on that issue, and Columbia wouldn't be giving any benefit, is what you're saying. Yeah. And it also speaks to this credit and this exclusion and how significant it is and how much it helps families. The exclusion, again, you can take if from income. So if your employer is paying for the attorney's fees, if the employer is paying for travel fees, anything else that's coming up to form these social networking sites, agency fees, to a certain extent, these are huge exclusions you can take from your personal income tax. And another reason why people want the adoption tax credit to continue, because it's not just a credit, it's also an exclusion from income. So it's very significant. Yeah.
As Wendy was saying in regards to the tax benefit, some companies offer it, some don't. A great thing is if your partner or your spouse is not a Columbia employee, perhaps that person's employer does offer it. A lot of times people don't think to ask. And sometimes enough asking has a company change their mind. Sometimes enough asking unearths the fact that the company actually has it. They just don't publicize it. A lot of times companies also, I've had clients where they set a cap to it. So it's the first amount of people who apply for it within a calendar or a fiscal year. If no one knows about it, usually you're the only person applying for it. So I've had a lot of clients who've had luck with that as well, in addition to the tax credit. So there are ways to be able to afford it. There are also networking and fundraising sites that are also alternative options of raising funds for this, because of the fact that people know that it's an expensive endeavor to create families, and people are able to either have creative ways of fundraising or to actually apply for grants from nonprofits, which will help defray the cost. So I've had clients who almost half their agency fees have been paid for by these kinds of sites. So there definitely are creative ways to go about it to handle the expense portion of the process.
I'm happy to ask a question and answer it. That I get typically. No, why not? I mean, because it'll be edited. So no, and it might add something to the presentation. A lot of people ask me, can I go on LegalZoom to create these documents? LegalZoom is a website where you don't have to pay an attorney to create your will. You can actually download a will for a certain fee, and you can take care of it. In fact, my own brother showed me, he lives out of state, so I couldn't do his will, his LegalZoom documents. So they're very, very popular documents. If you were to go to LegalZoom, the only area where I would recommend that you do it yourself is with your healthcare proxy. Just because it's such a vital document for gay families. And there are so many instances where people go on vacation and God forbid something happened. You really want a document that says that you can speak for your spouse. And you also want to make sure that this document on LegalZoom, and if it doesn't have it, add it. You want to be able to have visitation rights. So if you're going to do anything by yourself to save a little bit of money, do that. Otherwise, I absolutely would not recommend doing your own will, not because the document could be drafted incorrectly, which it probably could be, but because of the execution of the document. The execution meaning the document is witnessed by two people, and that witness of your signing the document is notarized, and there's a witness affidavit. That makes that document valid in a court of law. And there are nuances too. If beyond just the execution of the document being recognized in court, if you staple your will, don't staple your will. Because if you unstaple your will, and it's your original will, and it's probated and it goes through court, the judge looks at this will and it looks like a document that's been tampered with. And if, God forbid, you go on LegalZoom and you do this document yourself, don't write on your will. Once it's an original will, if you write on it and you try to change things, anything that you change needs to go through this execution, this proper execution process with two witnesses and a witness affidavit. So any change, any modification, even if it's, I'd like my wedding ring to go to so-and-so, you're going to mess up your document. So for the execution purposes, speak to an attorney. And a very simple will doesn't break the bank. It doesn't cost that much money. But certainly for your healthcare directives, simply because they are so important, and if you plan on traveling, you absolutely should have them, go on LegalZoom. Do a Google search. You can actually buy them at Staples.
Okay, so if you work for Columbia, you can cover your same-sex domestic partner under your medical and dental coverage, and your same-sex domestic partner children as well. The federal government, of course, does not recognize same-sex marriage, so the portion that that is your contribution, that is the difference between yours and what the next tier is to cover your same-sex domestic partner, is considered imputed income, and you're taxed on it federally. But now that New York State recognizes same-sex marriage, it is not taxed on the state level anymore. So that's new, and we did send out an email to that subject. And if you're legally married in New York, or actually any state, to contact the Benefit Service Center and let us know, so we can get you the New York State tax credit on that. The other, let's see, what else did I want to say?
This is $1,000.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah. Yes. Thank you, Carol. Last year we started offering the $1,000 credit for someone covering their same-sex domestic partner to sort of offset that tax burden a little bit. And this year it's I think. Yeah, it's prorated with each paycheck. So if you get married, if you add your same-sex domestic partner, whether you're married or not, you do get that credit. Also, optional life insurance. You can cover your same-sex domestic partner. You can get optional life insurance for your same-sex domestic partner for up to $100,000. And also, you can have your same-sex domestic partner as a beneficiary under the retirement plans. Apparently, that is not always the case.
It's coming up, what'd you say?
As a beneficiary under the retirement plans?
Right, you can add them as a beneficiary under the retirement plan.
Is that, I was talking to
There's no
someone
reason.
today who said that that was actually unusual, but maybe it's not.
You can select who
Under the retirement plan?
under a retirement plan, and in retirement plans they pass outside of probate, so it doesn't even it doesn't have an impact on sort of after death, that kind of an issue. Will the spouse be recognized? It would be my thought that you could select any beneficiary.
Yeah, well, that was kind of but I was talking to someone today
And then it was unusual.
that was, but
Could be.
that's really all that thanks for reminding me of the tax credit.
But there's also is there some language that's been developed to help people understand about the tax impact?
Well, it's the amount that is taxed is the amount between what the employee pays. That's pre-tax. That's deducted on a pre-tax basis, but then the difference between that and the tier that takes you to the next level, which is employee plus same-sex domestic partner or spouse, that is considered taxable income and computed income, and you're taxed on that. Again, not still on the federal level,
Yeah, but not at the state
on
level.
the state anymore. Yeah, so but we do require a marriage certificate, and then we if you've been married at any time in New York during this year, you're going to get a retroactive tax credit. And going forward, if you're enrolling on our benefits website, it does prompt you to if you're getting married or you are married to just provide the marriage certificate, and so we can put that code in for you to in our payroll system.
$1,000 credit, that's significant.
And $1,000
and unbelievable that it's required, like that it's something that would be needed, that covering your spouse under your medical insurance would be considered imputed income at the federal level. Imputed income meaning how much is insurance a year? $6,000-7,000 for each employee.
Well, it's by salary tier.
By salary tier,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, but so if you think about just
Depends on
generally
the-
what your health insurance coverage would be and what that would be worth, that would add to your income, taxable income, like let's say at a minimum of like $7,000. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, the IRS really has a long way to go in a bunch of different areas, but this one being paramount. The will is paramount for any family, gay or straight, who has children. You absolutely want to draft a will to name who your guardian is. You don't want to leave that decision up to a judge. Yes, revocable trusts have documents that go with them called a pour-over will, and it goes through our court system. So if there's anything, trust work, like you set up a trust. You own a house, you put that house into the trust, and now the deed documents say that it's owned by the trust, etc. You pass and you forgot to transfer your vacation house for whatever reason into the trust, or all of the other little items of property, your books, your journals, your jewelry, your artwork. We draft a pour-over will that goes with the revocable trust, and that would speak to the issue of guardianship, and that would go through the probate courts. Yeah.
So just to follow up on that question also, something that is part of the adoption process is that we really strongly encourage people who are forming families to consult with a trust and estates attorney for exactly what Wendy was talking about. Appointing a guardian, healthcare proxies, living will, especially if someone's pregnant in the situation, because if there's a medical emergency, you want to make sure that you don't face difficulties under a already stressful situation. So we very much work hand in hand in regards to having these planning documents for situations no one wants to talk about, that they hopefully never have to use. But the reality is sometimes you do, and it's better to be protected and not have regrets than have to deal with it and try to get your attorney on the phone at 10 o'clock at night because you have a really difficult nurse manager who just won't make the exception for you. And one other thing that I did want to mention in regards to just being able to afford these services, at least in the adoption community, no one wants to turn you away. No one wants to say, we can't afford to help you form a family. Ask. Consultations are almost always free. The majority of adoption attorneys, with the exception of for private adoptions, charge a flat rate as opposed to an hourly, so you really know what you're paying for up front. And oftentimes they'll accept sliding scale if you can really show the need. It's something that our practice offers because of the fact that I can't turn someone away who needs legal services, and that there isn't a nonprofit that will do it for free, but there are plenty of attorneys and plenty of places that will help and will make sure that you have this as a viable option that you can at least consider. So that's something that, don't be discouraged if you hear a price and you feel like you can't pay for it. Ask, do your research, and if you can't find someone who will give you a free consultation, call me, and I will find someone who will give you a free consultation.
So, yeah, I certainly give free consultations on these issues. Absolutely. The first hour, I'm happy to talk to you and answer basic questions. Absolutely. So, just like we're doing here now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the purpose of things like this, to be able to show people that competent and compassionate legal services are out there, and you don't have to mortgage your house in order to be able to afford it, but also that, you don't have to go with the stereotypical lawyer. You don't have to pay for someone who you feel like is going to be so expensive that you're scared to call them because they're going to start billing you from the second they think about you. That's not this kind of law.
Yeah, and will packages, I tend to do them if they're very simple. I do them on a flat fee basis for a family. So a will package could run you, depending on what was required, anywhere at the lower end of a scale of, I would say, $1,500 to $2,500, and that includes all of your healthcare directives, and it includes your will documents, and that really doesn't break the bank, and even a revocable trust for a gay couple, and that would include the pour-over will, and the healthcare directives could be $3,000 or under, and that's for the couple. So, yeah.